The big beautiful bill has passed, and Trump Trizzle will be signing it tomorrow on the 4th of July, as he intended. If you don't know, Trump Trizzle equals President Donald Trump. Just for my people that don't like when I speak slang, because people be on me. But at the end of the day, it's my YouTube channel. If you want someone that speaks politically correct and want to articulate themselves, go watch the news. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to see what the experts have to say about the big, beautiful bill being passed. Let's get into it.
House Republicans, after some defections, have passed Trump's spending bill. This is that big budget clash we've been following. It heads to the president's desk, where Donald Trump will be signing it into law tomorrow. We have the nonpartisan estimates here. The CBO says the bill adds $3 trillion plus the deficit. It'll slash over $1 trillion from healthcare and Medicaid. 10 to 12 million Americans ultimately could be booted off their health coverage. Funnels a lot of money to ICE and border enforcement, 100B over there. Trump and Republicans are celebrating however tough this was, longer, slower, more defections than they wanted. Ultimately, as they say, a win is a win. They set out to pass this thing. They lost some votes along the way. They even had some parts of it stripped by the parliamentarian, but they won passage today. Not without a fight. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries was on a warpath discussing the risks and the problems in the bill, and doing what Democrats have done increasingly in the second Trump term, which is find different ways, sometimes symbolic, sometimes even physical, to get up and show that they're fighting and to command some attention, even against Donald Trump, whose entire skill set is PR and attention. You're looking at some of the thunderous applause there as he continued on the record-breaking speech, 8-hour plus, the longest speech in the history of the United States House. This began around 5 a.m. this morning.
I rise today in strong opposition to Donald Trump's one big, ugly bill. This disgusting abomination, this reckless Republican budget is an immoral document. The largest cut to Medicaid in American history. The American people will not get over it, but they will get even next November. Extraordinary levels of corruption. Got some folks in this town, they go to church and they pray on Sunday. P-R-A-Y. And then they come to Congress and pray P-R-E-Y on the American people. I'm not down with that kind of faith. No matter what the outcome is on this singular day, we're going to press on. Press on for the rule of law. Press on for the American way of life. Press on for democracy. We're going to press on until victory is won. I yield back.
He yielded, but only after breaking the record. That marathon address went down pretty well, considering the Democrats are losing the budget battle here, which is expected. They don't have the same number of votes as Republicans.
8
Some
hours.
congressional math is just that. But you see here Leader Jeffries flanked by Democratic colleagues who seemed genuinely energized. Yes, politics is full of show, but you see here there was some real enthusiasm today about waging this battle any which way they could. The Democrats did not have the votes to stop the bill. There is no magic strength or strategy that was going to change that. It was only a question of whether Republicans were going to lose enough of their own. And they lost some in the Senate and ultimately 2 in the House. Now, Jeffries' intention was to force Republicans to also vote in the daytime Politico reports, using, again, the procedural levers they have to not stop the bill, but make sure that this still landed in the daylight, with so many Republicans who are worried this is the kind of vote that might cost them their jobs if enough constituents realize what it does and what it does to health care, et cetera. The bill ultimately passing by 4 votes with, as mentioned, those 2 Republican defections. That is how we end the week going into American Independence Day weekend, and we're joined by Douglas Brinkley, presidential historian, Rice University professor, and Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Eugene Robinson. Gene, your thoughts on what is now the ending of this round, the budget plan going to the White House tomorrow?
Well, look, this ended the way I always thought it would end in terms of the legislation being passed. The Republicans do have the majority in the Senate and the House, and Donald Trump wanted this bill passed, this big bill. It is big, and so it was going to pass. I mean, that was going to happen. The unexpected note was Hakeem Jeffries' speech. His 8-hour plus speech was an extraordinary thing in the House, and it certainly did serve to cause this vote to be held in the daylight, and to bring attention on the fact that these majorities are very narrow in both the Senate and the House that Republicans have. And this is a deeply unpopular bill. When people learn what's in it, they don't like it at all. And so to that extent, to the extent it was possible for Democrats to be successful today, they were successful. They were not able to stop the passage of this legislation that they believe, and I believe, is going to hurt a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Professor Brinkley?
218 Republicans, 214 Democrats, as Eugene's pointing out. It's close. And that's what the next election is going to be all about. This is the opening. Tomorrow opens the election for 2026. There's just no doubt about it. There were shocks this week or tension-filled moments. I thought perhaps Lisa Murkowski, on the heels of a book coming out and the press she was getting, may have stood up to President Trump in her profiles in Courage. I was at the JFK Library this year. They gave Profile in Courage award to Mike Pence. I thought Murkowski might be that person, but in the end, the fossil fuel industry controls her out of Alaska, and she didn't want to mess with them, and she didn't want to be the bane of all of the disdain for the MAGA world. So she folded her tent, and at that point, it seemed a foregone conclusion that it would get through Congress. I will say Mike Johnson seems to be delivering on what he needs to do. He did a prayer session, he huddled. Donald Trump then went and got on the phone, and they did what they needed to do to get this passed. But Johnson is now a significant speaker pulling this off.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I'm curious, Gene, because you followed this over so many eras. It does seem that the White House operation has learned over time that they are using the president's time and advocacy strategically, as Doug Brinkley just mentioned, that there are many extreme radical and indeed, according to many courts, unlawful activities by this White House. We actually cover that in the news frequently. But there's also a learning curve on this process, which, however controversial, is not illegal. This is not the abuse of federal forces or some other controversy we've covered. And it seems that in comparison to term one, they are more organized. And from what we can tell, the president is more engaged when called upon to deal with legislating something he's never shown a great personal interest in.
Yeah, they have definitely learned, and they have learned when the president should engage with directly with members of the House or the Senate. He's clearly learned how to do that. He's learned what buttons to push. They use both carrots and sticks. It was a lot of carrots with Murkowski, a lot of benefits for Alaska, a lot of sticks with some others, and they've learned that there are a few votes that they can just sort of write off. They weren't going to get Rand Paul in the Senate. They're not going to get Massey. Massey is always going to be a problem in the House, but they've learned a lot. And I agree with Doug. You have to say Mike Johnson is a much more effective Speaker of the House than certainly I expected him to be, and then I think almost everyone expected him to be. He is getting results. The president wants it passed. He gets it passed.
Yeah, and he's proven to be a little bit like Bruce Lee, where you have to be water first. Some people criticize that and say, oh, you have no firm position. I don't know what you think about anything. We can have that debate. But legislatively, he's done that approach, and that's different than, McCarthy was in these spats They may not have been of his choosing, but he couldn't get out from under them. He was in public, open warfare with what were admittedly difficult members of the caucus. Matt Gaetz no longer there, but he and Boehner and Paul Ryan before them would have these rolling public battles with those flanks. And Johnson, partly because you don't, I say it not with any disrespect, deliberately not trashing him, but you don't really know where he is on these things. And then sooner or later, he tries to land the plane. It's sort of the job. I mean, that's what LBJ did on a very different legislative agenda, one for civil rights and a fair deal. Our guests today, I want to point out on the substance, we talked about the maneuvering, but this budget, $1 trillion out of Medicaid, $150 billion from Medicare and Obamacare, 10 to 12 million people booted off coverage. And that is a direct, obvious breaking of Donald Trump's vow, meaning what he said before, if he knew he was going to do this, were outright lies, including to his own supporters.
Can you guarantee that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security will not be touched?
Yeah, I mean, I have said it so many times. We're not going to touch it.
We will not cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid benefits.
We're not cutting Medicaid, we're not cutting Medicare, and we're not cutting Social Security.
So what do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid?
The last voice, one of the Republican defectors, Doug Brinkley, it's very clear there that Donald Trump's mastery of PR and politics is these are widely unpopular plans, including on the right. So he broke a promise or was lying the whole time. How important is that as we live in an era where people want to retreat to their own spin or facts? But the fact is he broke that vow.
It's going to matter when people get hurt. You know, that all economies go up and down, and it's going to depend on Donald Trump's fate or the fate of 2026 and what our economy does. But what's shocking to me is that Trump is the one carrying out the sledgehammer to the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson, going after really Medicaid, Medicare, PBS, NPR, Wild and Scenic Rivers, after school programs, going after, so-called food stamp programs, as they used to be called. He's the one, he's the avenger. And that he's pulling off it's really quite stunning.
So that's what the experts think about the big, beautiful bill that was passed today. Again, President Trump will sign it tomorrow, and it's one of the things that he wanted to push because it's going to be, one of the biggest acts or feats that he has done in his presidency. There's a lot in the bill. The main things that I want to point out that are, things that Americans should be wary of is the budget cuts of health care. A lot of things are going up. Like you said, they giving more money to ICE. They giving, of course, more money to defense spending. But they're cutting things like Medicaid, as you guys see. $930 billion are being cut from Medicaid. $170 billion from Medicare. And 11.8 million people would lose health insurance. Those are big numbers. So that is the main thing that worries me about this big, beautiful bill. They're cutting a lot from people's well-being. And that, of course, is concerning. You even seen a Republican get up there and say, hey, president said we won't go cut health care, Medicaid, Medicare, and he did it. So he openly lied to the people. But from my experience, everybody that follows Trump, they always defend him some way, but they just showed you that he said, we're not going to cut Medicaid. We're not going to cut Medicare as he's running. He said that multiple times. They showed you 3 or 4 different clips of him saying they won't going to cut it. And he comes out with a big, beautiful bill. And again, he cuts Medicaid. $930 billion. Cuts Medicare. $170 billion. And again, 11.8 million people would lose health insurance. I'm just saying. Let me know your thoughts. And like always, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.